It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
I said I'd go live in 30, and I forgot that I didn't even have the open music up and running. So I think we all got that. New time in or counter or whatever we want to call that thing that says when we're gonna start. It still just ends with a black screen, and I don't know. Maybe we can clean that up a little bit. I don't know. So how you had to pull up After Effects?
Yeah, to put that together, a countdown timer animation, I had to open up After Effects for the first time in about 5 years.
I don't even remember how I did the timer, honestly.
And I discovered that After Effects is probably the most inefficient piece of software ever made.
So wasn't After Effects designed to work with Premiere, which was Adobe's video editing system, right?
Yeah.
To allow you to do almost like frame by frame manipulation or animation on top of video or something like that?
Motion graphics.
Graphics. Okay.
So okay.
When
to animate some
all that
text,
kind of fun stuff. Yeah.
Some special effects, do some compositing, which I actually did when I started at NCC teaching. I was teaching some new media courses too, and I was doing a little bit of After Effects with the 3D animation. So, but it's been a while because I've just been focusing on web development, so I haven't been teaching or using that as much. But yeah, when I was doing the rendering of our simple countdown animation,
right? It just counts down.
It's just a 5-minute animation that is a static screen, basically static background with just a countdown text, right? So I have 128 gigs of memory on my computer. When I was rendering, it was taking up 80% of that. I'm like, what is going on here?
For a digit moving. I couldn't remember how I did the other countdown, but now that I think about it, I think I found a stock countdown timer, like 5, 10, whatever minute countdown timer. I imported the video, and it was it was like on black or on green or whatever. Used a chroma key, and then just had it rendered that way. But you had to do something. How do you? With After Effects, is it just a timer?
It's pretty simple.
It have one? Okay.
No, it doesn't have one built in. You used it with just an expression. So I found it's just a little bit of JavaScript code. Just do basically a countdown like you would code in JavaScript. You could just assign that to an element as an expression, and then you can just set up 2 keyframes, one in the beginning and one at the end. And basically, the keyframes just manage the amount of time. So you start with like 300 to 0, and then it just with the expression, it just countdowns the text.
Oh, okay. So and just change the text, and then
that's all it does.
And then what does After Effects render? It renders that as a video.
Yeah, frame by frame. Yep, 30 frames per second, and takes up over 100 gigabytes to do that of memory. I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
How did that have to work with with Premiere? When you would use After Effects with the Premiere, would it render with the Premiere video, or would you render it and then somehow treat it as a separate track?
Well, would be considered composition. So you could bring in your After Effects project as a composition on a layer inside of Premiere, and then it would render it together. Or you could render it separately in After Effects and then import it in, frame by frame, and then import it into Premiere.
But it was a layer, so it would render. So everything you were doing would render there. Okay, that makes sense. So
yeah.
But we have brand new countdown matches the look of this.
We're trying to make it more professional.
Trying to. I saw that you moved our names subtly, so they.
And I messed up mine.
Spot.
That's something I can't get right. So I fixed yours. I messed up mine though. So my name's a little bit off. We
can go back to that, I guess. I don't know. Oh, are we trying to center them? Is that what we're trying to do?
Well, under the frames.
Yeah, under
boxes,
the frames.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We'll have to keep playing with that. Anyway, well, that's a good show. 5 minutes of that. That's all the show prep that we have. I was wondering because we kind of ended with this last week, and it is something that I wonder about. I'm curious, and if we can't get into it, that's fine. But your client, where you're giving them this web UI to update a thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I'm just in my mind with and we talked about it at the end of the show, and whether or not maybe Webflow is not the thing, because as Keith from the comment section said, it's Webflow struggles with how you publish things. It's an all or nothing, as what I've heard from other people and what he put in the comment.
What do you mean by struggles to publish things? What is that? What do you mean by that?
There's a lack of finite control over or granular control over what's published. So if you hit like the publish button, it's everything that was changed is published.
Oh,
There's
really?
no way
Okay.
to be like, hey, I'm working on this page. Tough. When we go live, we go live. So you can't say like, oh yeah, we're working on the we're working on the product page for this new product. We've got some changes, but we're not ready to release them yet. It's like, well, if I'm ready to release my blog post, you better be able to release that because they have to go together.
So Webflow wouldn't be the best tool for a CI/CD pipeline.
Well, it's yeah. But whether Webflow is a good choice for what you need to do or not, there's other things like it out there that let you say, hey, I can go and edit this piece of content and then hit save, and it's good. So my curiosity is for this particular use case, what made custom code the right solution versus just like an off the shelf? Yeah, you can build your site and update it as you need to, just with like a WYSIWYG style editor. Because as a developer, like I get the fact that every time there's a problem, we could write some code to solve that, but we could also maybe use a tool. And the longer I'm doing this, the more I'm like, hey, if the tool's out there, let's just use it, because I write enough code as it is. So that was my curiosity there, like that type of calculation. What makes it worth the custom site driven by DynamoDB and all that?
Well, I do recommend applications like Webflow or Squarespace or Weebly. All these online website editors.
Yeah, I've seen Weebly. Yeah,
especially for people who, do not know how to code. Because these are no code or low code tools.
Right.
And that one just wants to have a good looking website, built off a template, and just get it online as fast as possible. And I highly recommend that to people who, let's say, photographers, video editors, authors, whoever just needs a website, a very simple website, and they don't mind paying whatever, around 30, 40, I don't know if it goes up to $50, but that monthly cost, they don't mind that. And they also don't have to pay a web designer, web developer to build out the project. So I do recommend those tools for those types of clients. This client was, I have a relationship with him. It's kind of somebody from my past. So, and I was going back and forth with him saying, okay, I'm building applications on AWS, and this is, and building out infrastructure. And I kind of want to use your project as a test case for a certain set of infrastructure that I want to build. And it's a relatively simple site, and the design is pretty much static. It's not going to change. And we, redesign his website. But he wanted to have the ability to go in each week and just update his projects, just like his project blurbs that he has on the website, maybe once or twice a week. And he just wants an editor to do that. And before, I was actually using Prisma. Have you ever heard about Prisma? Prisma.io?
Prismo. Not Prismic?
Prisma, I think it is. Or no, it's Prismic. Yeah, maybe.
Yes. No, I know Prismic, because Prismic is one of those headless CMS concepts, API-driven CMS, where they give you, if there's a couple of them, so I might be getting confused, but they give you a UI where you update pieces of content, and then it's a really easy SDK to say, hey, inject that piece of content here in my somewhat static website.
Yep, exactly. So I used that in his first version of his website. That was a couple of years ago. And so he was using the editor, and he didn't mind that. He didn't mind logging into the Prismic editor, gave it kind of a nice kind of form editor to edit the data, and it's editing in real time. So
one question on that though, for Prismic, did they do it? Do they bring it from a like a client side? Do they bring in the data? Is it a JavaScript SDK that's bringing it into the page on the client side, or is there server side? I think there's probably both. Which were you using? Like, were you rendering the page with the content server side and shipping it to the client? Or were you rendering a template to the client and then?
Well, I was doing actually both, because initially I just used the JavaScript SDK to pull it in, as the page is rendered, then it's making calls out to the SDK to bring in the data real time. But then I use Gatsby for the website. So with Gatsby, when it builds a website, you can call out to other APIs or GraphQL API, and then I was able to actually pull in that data also for the build time. So I was doing a little bit of both. So like if he made changes, and I did also have this set up with a a GitHub Actions kind of build process too, so I could kind of build it when he was making changes. But initially, when I designed it, I just did, okay, let's get this online as fast as possible. Let me use the JavaScript SDK to pull in the data into the website. And then as it evolved a little bit more, I said, okay, we could set up like a little bit of a pipeline for this, so that every time he makes a change, you can call out to GitHub to run the build process, and the build process then could then pull the updated data and rebuild the site.
Because in that context, you're building what is essentially a static site.
Yes.
On the server side static site that ships down to the client.
Yep.
I'm thinking of it from obviously a more dynamic site, because that's where I live, right? Where I could have a page that renders some PHP, or that renders HTML. I could have PHP render an HTML page. I'm guessing reach out to the Prismic API and be like, hey, give me this piece of content. I'm gonna inject in the template, and I'm gonna server side render, basically do server side what you were doing client side. But I can see what you're saying. You would also then just build the static site if there's not a lot of changes. That's interesting, because you're building a static site off of CMS.
Yeah. It's just with Gatsby has that built in, right. with the plugins that it has. It actually is a nice system to use. It's a slow build. It doesn't build fast, but it worked pretty well. Nice. So what I'm doing now is I'm trying to basically recreate that workflow on AWS using DynamoDB, using
so
S3.
Bit of this is an exercise for you.
Yes, and the client's flexible. But also, I am saving the client money, because it does cost money to have a Prismic account and to host that each month. Now the cost is basically 50 cents a month.
50 cents a month. So, but I mean, then we look at like the scale of costs and things. The level of effort, depending on what it takes, is that worth it? And I asked this question from my own perspective too, right? Because I've got some different things that that I work on. I want to throw like this website up to talk about just some content I'm generating, and it's like, well, I could build a site, but I don't want to do that, right? So honestly, what I did is I just took a Notion page and published it to the web, and now it's really easy to edit. It's simple, right? It doesn't look great. It's simple,
and
but
Notion,
I was able to.
And Notion doesn't give you the ability to change the theme at all, right? It's pretty much pretty much just Notion. So if you go to a Notion page, like Notion. It's a Notion page.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's confused with what this is. But every week I'm generating content, so it makes it easy for me to just upload it. I just attach the files, and they're there. It was easy to put. You can. It has very limited page layout functions, right? Like you could do a column here, a column there, or like you could make columns for content. So I was able to put a little information about what all this content is about, upload that, have the links for some PDFs that are generated every week. And my next, it's like that was the quick stopgap, because I was going to do it at the start of the year, so I wanted to get it up there. Got it up there. The next thing that I'm thinking, like, so let's make this better. And for me, better is something like one of the many WYSIWYG site editors, right? Like just build the site in there and publish it, because I don't need to it doesn't need to be, it's just content. I just need to get the content up there. So for me, it's like, no, it's not really worth how I may have in the past looked at that, which is to say, oh, we'll have a database that has all the different pieces of content. And each page, it'll go find, it'll pull it from the database, it'll inject in the template, it'll render it. It's like, no, why don't I just let somebody else do that? Because they've built that. And for me, probably something like Webflow would work, because it's not like it's a big company, but I'm working on different things. It's like, no, I just want to make an edit and hit go.
It also depends on how much control you want. Because when you use a platform like Webflow or even Notion, they maintain the application, the infrastructure. And when you are building a Webflow site, you're building a Webflow site, even though it's rendered out as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In the end, it's the database.
Yeah, there's limitations.
Everything, the interface, everything behind the scenes is Webflow, and you don't have any control over that. You can tie into it with their API a little bit. I started to take a look at it, but it is kind of, I don't know. You're building a Webflow site, and they do give you the ability to export out. But then when they export out, they're exporting out their HTML and CSS, and to really officially move that to someplace else is going to take a good amount of work.
Yeah.
So I never felt comfortable, me personally, building client websites that ties that client to that platform.
Okay, I got you.
Unless they're already on that platform and they're happy with it and they just want to redesign, then that's a different story. Because they have no intention to change. But if I'm going to sell a platform as a product to a client, I want to make sure they have some flexibility with it, because I'm probably, who knows, I'm probably not going to be their developer for forever, right? Somebody else is going to take over the project, and you want to make sure that it's built on a platform that gives some flexibility. Some would say that building it on AWS and building it on that infrastructure, or Azure, or Google Cloud, whatever, these cloud providers, also kind of locks you in, because if you really want to build a serverless, cloud native application on that infrastructure, you are kind of tied to the infrastructure. But you could, as a developer, move it someplace else. So if I need to move this workflow to Azure, it would take a little bit of time and thought, but I could definitely do it.
Yeah. And I guess, and even like something like Prismatic is
I think we're calling it like 20 different names. Prismatic.
Not a sponsor. So.
Oh my gosh, I have to look this up. What is this called? I
think it's Prismatic.
It's not, I don't
Prismatic. Know. Yeah, it is. No.
But anyway, it's just Prismic.
Prismic. Okay.
It's Prismic IO. Yes, it's Prismic IO.
So using Prismic.
I love that people, when they listen to their show, they think, man, when they talk about these services, they have no idea what they're called.
No idea what they're doing. Yeah. No, that's about that. That's the vibe we get. So something like that is a little bit more flexible in your mind, anyway. Like it doesn't tie it in as much. Like using something like Prismic.
Oh, that is, I don't mind using actually like a third-party database service like Prismic. I think Prismic is actually.
I feel like that's a little bit more than a database, right? Because but
in the end, it's
a content database.
It's a database, and one of the things when you work with a database is having a good kind of management system on top of that, a good editor,
right.
Can, to define your schema or your structure, and then have a good way to edit the data. And Prismic is really good at that. But like I said, I kind of want to. And like, if I didn't have any issues with Prismic, I thought it's a great service. I just wanted to recreate this type of workflow on AWS. Yeah. Which with DynamoDB, it does have some ways to edit, but it's not very user friendly. I would not give this client an AWS account and give him and kind of walk him through how to edit the data on like in DynamoDB and kind of walk him through the interface. I probably could, but I know he probably wouldn't like that from me. Because the interface isn't the best. For a developer, it definitely makes sense. But from a customer-facing perspective, it's not a great interface for somebody who's not in like a DevOps or a developer to work with it. But Prismic has a nice UI.
When you're saying you can edit data in Dynamo, is it just like a, I don't know, like key value? You just open it up and
it's just you define basically you're defining the schema and the data at the same time. When you define like,
all right, because Dynamo's key value store, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So you just be like, hey, paste this JSON blob into this key.
Well, it does give you a nice editor.
Be good to go.
It does give you a nice formatter, but like I said, it's made for developers, and it's not really made for, I don't think it's not made for customers. So, but Prismic had a good balance of that, where their interface was very user friendly. So it gave you like a key value NoSQL database, but then gave you a good interface on top of that.
Gotcha. I had another question, but it completely escaped my mind. Oh well.
Well, I was curious about what have you been working on, and we haven't talked about Phone Burner as much.
We have.
What do you guys? Have you guys been doing anything interesting? Is there any new tech?
Those phones, man. Just burn
any new tech you guys are working on, or any new cool projects that you have in the future that you are working towards?
I'm trying to think. If there, this always gets weird. Like I don't even know what I'm allowed to talk about sometimes. From a public standpoint.
Well, just be very general if you can.
Just be very general. Yeah. Well, we're enabling people to.
Nobody listens to our show anyway, so who cares?
It's true. That's true. We enable people to connect with their customers and their prospective customers over. No, I guess that's kind of what we do. No, I remember my question. Some of the headless CMS projects. Have you played with any of those? Because that's what Prismic is trying to. I don't even know. Like I just see them out there. Some open source projects.
Oh, that are yes, the last one that
they're like the run your own Prismic, where it's like we don't. It's not like the WordPress. It's not a CMS where it's like, we also provide the rendering side. It's like we just provide the content management, and then we give you an API and you build the rest yourself.
Supabase was the last one that I used.
I talked about this a while ago. Was that? Okay.
And that's a really nice product. It is an open source project, and you could.
I thought that was more like Firebase, though. But no, is it?
Well, it was trying to be an open source competitor to Firebase. That's the way they brand it or sell it. But it's a really great system that basically gives you a like you're talking about, basically CMS type functionality, that you can define your database, manage your data. It does have a great API that you can interface with. And I was actually teaching it to some students last year, as because a way to kind of have your database online, and MySQL database, so you could define like with your tables, with the relations between them. So I was actually using with students, and it's a really great product. It is open source, and you could roll it out in your own kind of environment if you wanted to. It's probably not an easy process. I think they do have a Docker. Dockerized, or they have a Docker version of it that you can run, but it's not the most straightforward one to implement, but it's actually a nice product.
But that is more like Firebase, right?
Well, it's not. Firebase also provides. It doesn't host any files, so Firebase has that type of static file hosting, that CDN functionality. Supabase doesn't have that. It's more for the data, like it's more for the database, the API. That's really kind of most of the functionality that maybe they're going to eventually have I think you do have some file storage. You can upload like images and store them up but it's not meant to like host like static applications, like statically built applications.
Gotcha.
You can do with Firebase.
What I'm thinking of is more, and I just pulled up one project. I think I'm pronouncing it right. I think it's Strapi, which is STR, then API.
I've heard of that, yeah.
And it's like, it looks like they have plenty of UI for you to create content types and like do what you would do in like a Prismic. It's like, hey, this is a about, or this is a product, or this is a blog post, and then 0 to allow you to publish that. Like everything else, you would have to then wire up into their API, or perhaps I don't know if they have some bindings that you could use with languages directly. I'm just kind of scrolling through. But that I was intrigued by that. I never played with one, but I was intrigued by that because it's like, yeah, here's the thing to give your users if you want to kind of move away from a like WordPress style thing, a site where it's like, okay, it's all in one. We're gonna add our plugins to make it work the way you want it to work. Why are you using WordPress? Well, just because it has a good editor and it makes it easy for people to log in and change their content. These seem to be the answer for that, where we give you the user interface to log in and change your content, but then displaying it and rendering it is 100% on you. We don't want to get into that. And because that's where it gets really complex from a CMS platform concept. Like you have to be very general and allow a lot of customization, and then when you're customizing stuff, a lot of times is more complex than just doing it. Right, like if you're thinking about like a Drupal or Joomla or some of those big CMS,
don't mention Drupal. No,
right? Well,
no.
You know what I'm saying.
Joomla,
like,
no. Oh my gosh, those I have pains.
Or WordPress, right? Where it's like we're gonna take content pieces and we're going to display them in a way, like a portfolio site.
Yes,
like
let's rate the worst to worst PHP content management systems.
Because
it would be between Drupal and Joomla. It would be a tough. For me, at least. And you have Magenta.
Well, what were the
too.
other ones? Like those are just the ones I know of. What were the other ones?
Well, Magenta was more of an e-commerce, but that was a beast. I remember doing a project on that. Yeah, so I remember when I was doing consulting back then, I was doing a good number of PHP content management projects for clients that had existing were using either WordPress or Drupal. Like I had one. It was just those systems. I don't know what. I don't know. Maybe you as a PHP developer can explain to me. Why did Drupal become the beast that it is? And I don't know the way that it's even WordPress. I've had issues with WordPress.
I don't know that I can explain that.
And I agree. WordPress has a very nice kind of back end content management, and that's why and customers love it. And I think it is. It's a good system to use. I've had issues with but then to make it work for your non-blogging use case, right? Like, I want to be a portfolio site for my photography, or I want to show my products. Then there's all these, you got to we have this special either plugin or I forget what they call it, and I got to make sure it's customized right and configured right to show it the way you. And I feel like all the work then goes in trying to make WordPress work the way you want it to on the customer or whatever you want to call that side of it, right? Like the public facing side. The theming, I know, I was fine with actually, working with the templates and the theming system. There's the plugin system, and either if you need to customize a plugin, deal with its hook system, I don't know.
Right.
It's just it felt like it was just kind of patched together. Right. And then Drupal's even worse. It feels like how the modulars or components of how it's built. It just feels like, why was it built this way? But I haven't looked at it in I don't know, 15 years. So
it's still around.
I don't know. I
don't
want to think
that's,
about it.
That to me, that's what made these open source headless CMS concepts intriguing, because I felt like, what you're doing is saying the ease of allowing the end user to update content. We've got that covered, because who cares what that interface? You don't want to necessarily mess with that interface, because hey, it's an application. I go there and I update the content. Now displaying the content on your public facing site, that's all on you. And you get to start from fresh because you just hit our API and ask for pieces.
The other thing about these systems that we're talking about, well, not WordPress or Drupal, but like the Strapi, the Supabase, these are just abstractions on top of cloud providers like AWS. So they're just like a layer on top, that provides a nice kind of user, like Fly.io is the same kind of thing. Like all these
Strapi says you can self-host, or we have it ready to
all
go
these
in the
platforms
cloud.
are just extra layers on top of a cloud provider. So, and that what I've also been kind of feeling, the older I get, like I don't want the less abstractions that I can kind of deal with. I don't know, because it just provides like an extra layer. There's usually always an extra cost with that, financial cost, extra management cost too, and also a dependency that you're having on these providers. So I don't know.
And this is why 100% of Mark's websites are written in assembler.
Assembler. WASM.
That's true. We could dig into that a little bit. Now, I remember back in the day, what was it? SpinRite. Do you ever remember SpinRite? SpinRite was a hard disk kind of.
It sounds familiar.
Maintenance and recovery software.
Okay.
And the thing that was interesting was I forget who the author of it was. I could probably look it up, but he still, even on Windows, which it ran on Windows, he wrote all of his code in assembly. So it was very, very, very small.
Do you remember the game Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Yes, I think we've talked about this before.
That's written in assembly too. That's like a piece of art written in assembly. Like it's just amazing. I remember when that was I don't know. I think
how did they even?
It's crazy to think about that it was made by one developer. I think it's Chris Sora, I believe. It was just one developer. He wrote it in assembly, and it basically was. And if you take a look at some videos of Roller Coaster Tycoon, you can build these complex amusement parks with like roller coasters. It is sprite based, so it is, you see the pixels. It has
it was like a
isometric
thing, right?
kind of top. Yeah, it's like SimCity, but it felt so much more complex because you had the people walking around. You could pick up the people, you could move them around to the different rides, and it had so much going on, like the systems that this game had, and it was built with assembly, which is crazy to think about. It's amazing.
Can you still play it today?
Yeah. It's still being maintained. There's actually an open what's it called? There's actually an open source project that you can, as long as you own the game, you could download an open source version of it. You still need to own the game from a licensing standpoint, but you could download an open source version of it that's being actively maintained. So developers are passionately keeping this alive because it's such a loved game. And I remember playing that so much when I was a kid.
I'm looking at it right now. I see on Steam there is a Roller Coaster Tycoon Deluxe.
Yeah, the sequel that's the one you should really get. So that kind of has a little bit more features, it's a little bit more refined. It's basically very, very similar to the first one. And it is, once again, that was also the last game that Chris worked on. Then after that, he left and he didn't support the game anymore from a development standpoint. But it's if you haven't checked it out, you should. It's a great game.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the videos now. Like, you're right, this isometric, very much pixel based.
Yeah.
Release date was March 31st of 1999 of Roller Coaster Tycoon Deluxe.
Yeah, I remember playing it. I remember buying that box in the store. I remember playing because it looked so cool. And when I went to, was it EB Games or I don't know, Micro Center or something like that, where I can't remember where I got it from. We had to buy it in a box, and then I played that so hard. It was a great game. I still have it installed. I don't get sucked into it as much anymore, but yeah, that's a great game.
You still have it installed?
Yeah, I do. Oh yeah, absolutely.
On your Dell server?
Yeah. So occasionally I spin it, probably maybe I don't know, once a month, maybe every other month. I might spend an afternoon, a weekend, kind of just playing it, bring back some memories. Yeah.
So was it SimCity? Like you have to build the roller coaster or what?
Yeah, you could build your own roller coasters. They had pre-built rides like a carousel or the
And you just kind of
pirate
drop
ship.
them in to
You could just
your
drop them
theme
in,
park?
place them, and then you draw out the paths. You design where the bushes, the trees are, but
Right,
the
because from a
big
roller coaster, you could like loop the roller coaster.
yeah,
I'm
and
guessing
the big
all
feature was you
through.
could design different types of roller coasters, like wooden,
Oh, nice.
metal. It kind of so you had a lot of different styles that you could work from. Also, water flume rides. Right, you could
Okay, yeah.
design those. So pretty much any ride you could think of at an amusement park, you could basically design a style of that ride in Roller Coaster Tycoon.
And was it like SimCity in that your revenue then funded your expansion, and
Yep.
you had to wait for people to come in? And
Yep. You got to wait for people to pay those tickets,
nice.
give you money. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like there's a Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic from Atari that is on
You could even
Google
you could even
Play,
play
so
it on your phone.
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
If you go to the Android Play Store or the Apple App Store, you can download it and play it on your phone or your tablet. Actually, it's actually not that bad playing on your phone too. You have to zoom in, zoom out a lot, but with the pinch zoom, it actually works pretty well. I've also owned that too.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see because you can see the high level and then getting close and start.
Yeah. It's a little bit tricky when you have to like tap to like kind of draw out the pathways.
Oh yeah.
That's a little bit iffy on a touch device, but
I can see that being like I'd rather do that with a mouse. That's for sure. And then you said, so if you have a copy of the game, there's like an open source maintained that's being improved where I'm guessing it's like you're downloading patches for what you already have.
It's open RCT2 openrct2.org. So it's just an open source project that they basically are patching and keeping the game updated.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're keeping the game alive. They still say you still have to own the game because it's going to check for the licensed game install, but then this basically installs over top of that. And then it has patches, performance, improvements. I don't know if they're updating with extra like rides, or I'm not sure about that. The features there, but it's mostly just for performance and keeping the game updated. Yeah, if you go to the features,
you can run it on Linux too, huh?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Well, it's built with assembly, Tim.
Yeah, you can run it anywhere, I guess, right? Yeah. Who saw this conversation going this direction? No one.
But I always love talking about Roller Coaster Tycoon.
The beauty of this show. No one saw it going this direction.
I was trying to get you to talk about phone booting. You're like, I can't talk about that.
That's pretty much how that felt, isn't it? Yeah. No, I mean, it's not that we can't. Gonna be I'll be with a couple of the other devs in the team at PHP Tech next month, which I can say next month because there's 2 more days of this one. You didn't see that one coming, did you, Mark?
Where's that QR code?
Did you
see it here?
Let me see what I can find here in our QR code.
My $5 discount.
Library. I don't have a discount code. So
so this is just a code just to go to the site.
It's just a QR code to go buy.
Not even a discount code.
Go buy your ticket. Go buy your ticket now, Mark, because you can see me talk. We need to give 2 talks. We talked last week, didn't we? I was going to give a talk.
When is this concept? Let's dig into this a little bit. When is?
Oh wow! Look at this.
I'll talk about this with you. I will.
Not a sponsor. PHP Tech is, I should know because I'll be there, April 23rd through the 25th. April 23rd
in Chicago?
Of this year. In Chicago. Yep. I think I'm speaking the first day. I've got a 30-minute slot to talk about Docker, and I think we talked about that last week, didn't we? I'm doing like the everything that's not trying to deploy your entire stack to Docker, like here's how you can use it to wrap around, like a command line utility that would require you to install Node or Ruby and all the things you don't want to have on your system because of all the dependency headaches. Just do it in an image on a container and then run as a container and you're good, right? I don't even have PHP installed on my computer. I just run it in a container so I can always grab whatever version I want. So we'll talk about a lot of that, and we'll talk about how you do that, and that'll give us the opportunity for those who Docker might still seem a little mystical to because it's something maybe the ops team uses and you kind of know a couple commands that you run to get stuff running locally. It'll go through what's really going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure as I kind of get this talk polished again. When I did it originally, I did it at Just PHP, which was a 1-day conference in Arizona, and we did it at a improv and comedy club. So it was supposed to have a little bit of a lighter feel. So I trotted out 2 puppets to illustrate the difference between a virtual machine and Docker.
Oh, the Puppet Master Tim.
Yeah, because
Look at you.
I think I'll have to look
any
back at
opportunity
my
to bring up
notes.
puppets, you probably would do that.
Not actually any
Do
opportunity.
you like
It's
carry
few
them?
and
Do you
far
have like a
between.
puppet suitcase that you bring with
I do
you?
not have a puppet suitcase. I do not. I do
You
not.
could just
And
like
in fact,
when you roll into events and you have to like do something and you say, "Oh, could I integrate my puppets into this?"
I mean, in fact, now that you bring it up, Mark,
You
I
do
just
have a
happened
puppet case
I
right
just-
right
I
beside
just
your
happen
desk.
to have one with me.
There you go.
But anyway, so the problem with I use this one there, and I don't know if I can bring him back because my kids pulled his eyes off. I don't know if you can see that.
This is what our show needs. We need more puppets.
Need more puppets. So this is Herschel. This is Herschel. You might know his brother. He's in show business. It's Steve. Anyway, no, they pulled the little blacks of his eyes out. So I have to do some repair on this puppet. But no, I illustrated it by saying, I put this puppet. Sorry, kids, it's a puppet. Like you see, it's not real. My hand goes in it, and I would put it on to explain that no one's confused when the puppet's there. They're like, oh, that's Tim, and on top of Tim is just simply a puppet. It's not something else. It's not like a parasite. It's not like something that is like a leech or something that's siphoning the life out. Well, that's what a virtual machine's like. It's another complete organism. It's another entire computer that it thinks it is, and it is just pulling the life out of yours. That's why they're so hard to run. But Docker's simple.
Mm-hmm.
Docker just says, hey, it's really the same computer. We're just going to decorate it a little bit. At no point is this thing out of my control. At no point is it going to start trying to attack me. It's me. It's still me. And that's what Docker is. It's just a process that's running.
So you are going to pull out the puppet for this.
I don't know. I don't know.
I think you should.
I don't have the other one here, but then I also have a puppet that we got. It's my kids' toys, so I take them with me. I also have a puppet that it's all Velcro, right? Like you Velcro the eyes on it, and you Velcro the arms on it, so kids can be creative and make whatever puppet they want, right? And I use that to talk about how a Docker file works. It's like, well, here's just the puppet, and then you're going to say, for my purpose, I need 2 eyes, and they're these eyes, and I need these arms, and you just bolt them on, and it just runs as a process with those additional files on your computer, but it's still your computer. No one's confused. It's not a different computer. It doesn't think it's its own operating system. No, it's just running with those additional files on, and so I have a whole bit that I do. I don't know if there's going to be time though, because this is a 30-minute slot. So, but
not enough time for puppets, but
yeah,
hey,
but
it would definitely
we'll
bring the crowds into your talk.
Would it, you think?
I think if you advertise, say
All
Tim's
right,
puppet
so
talk.
In the comments, folks, in the comments,
Tim's
By
Docker
the time
puppet.
PHP Tech is going to be done by the time I get this show online.
Doesn't
But
Doc,
yeah.
It's a whale icon. It's a whale mascot. I think you should need like a whale puppet.
Oh, I need a whale for Docker.
Yeah.
Well, especially gets really confusing.
You should have a whale and then an elephant.
And on top of
and
that,
have them kind of work
a
together.
whale and an elephant. You think so?
Yeah.
We'll do that a little stop motion.
Put the elephant on top of the whale, and then kind of show
it's PHP on Docker.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
I got it. Anyway, I do have a whale puppet, don't I? I can go find that one real quick.
That's what's in all those bids back there. It's
all
all just filled with puppets.
Yeah, I tell people they're my children's clothes, but they're not. It's just all the puppets that I've collected over the years. Anyway. Mark's there thinking this show, he's trying to make it more professional. He's like, this is what's going to get me that job. And I'm like, no, it's not. I'm going to talk about puppets for a good 15-minute segment in this show. And no one's ever going to hire you, Mark. Anyway, because you've been associated.
I'm never going to be able to show this to prospective clients or
this train wreck. Yeah, is this streaming to your LinkedIn profile, Mark?
It's to your LinkedIn.
Oh, I thought we added yours too. Did we not?
Yeah, I did not do that.
Smart move. Smart move in retrospect. Yeah. All right. What were we talking about? Oh, it's also doubly confusing because if you know what Puppet is from an ops perspective, that is software to keep your virtual machines, or not really your virtual machines, but it's to keep any machine kind of in a configuration, but it's used a lot with virtual machines. So I confuse it by just bringing that up as an illustration. But yeah, we're talking about that. Some of the team will be there. I think, let me look through this. I'll look through this because I could, that's how I could figure it out. I'm also going to be talking about something that we're open sourcing from PhoneBurner. Our API handler kind of pattern. Did we talk about this last week?
So how are you open sourcing? Are you just going to like release it on GitHub, or what's kind of your?
That's it. So some subtle changes that we have to make, but I'm trying to stay true to how we're actually using it.
And what does this do?
Not much. intentionally so, right? Like it's not like a micro API framework thing that says this is how you write APIs. It's a very lightweight set of interfaces that you can use and couple together in the way that you need. So you can put it. The goal is for us, like we have a well-aged code base, and instead of having to bring in, we wanted to do better APIs, and instead of bringing in some existing API framework and figuring out, well, how do we make that compatible with what we do? We just kind of started saying, well, let's make some simple API handlers and kind of observe what we're doing and see if we can have a generalized solution to that. And that's kind of what we came up with. So I've extracted that out, set the bounds in a place where it's like some of the things that we were tightly coupled to, figured out how to decouple that with some factories. And I'll be talking about our API handler, and the open source process there. I was going to look. I think Andy, who's also on our team, is giving a talk on enums, because PHP 8 now has enums. So
look at PHP.
Look at us, right? And they're pretty nice, pretty nifty. He's also going to give a great talk. I've seen it a couple times on find and safely. He calls it zombie hunt. Find and safely remove undead code. So kind of digging in and finding the parts of your application. You're like, does anything use this anymore? And how to both identify those and then safely remove them.
That's what we need AI for.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure.
No, actually, I think that could be a good use case, because I'm really fascinated, and I'm doing some work on setting up some, with the CDK, and working with the code pipeline on AWS and integrating that with Bedrock, which is their AI. I really think AI integrating that more in the developer kind of workflow as the build process. And I'm not saying this would be a part of a build process the way what you described here, kind of finding applications or code that's not being used anymore. But I'm thinking, could there be some analysis tool that you could use with AI that you custom build? So it's not, using a general AI, but you're using something that's, a model that's custom built for your code that could then kind of find that for you.
I could see tuning. I mean, we've got static analysis tools that can give us a hint at some of those. Right. But when you're talking about a dynamic language where you could pretty much call methods by variable, like you can't sometimes know for sure. So I could see
maybe
AI
if it was
being
like a lightweight kind of middleware that was kind of listening for everything that was going on. Like you said, if it's how memory is being passed back and forth and kind of but like you said, because PHP is a dynamic language, it does have to listen to it kind of in real time within that process. But I don't know, that could be something interesting that. Because I think to try to code that out by hand, or yourself, that would be pretty. How would you approach that? How do you approach that problem if you had to?
Well, I don't want to give away his talk because you should
because he's doing it.
Okay, he's going to talk about it. But there is tooling out there that'll look at your code and pretty much say, hey, as far as we can tell, this code path is never used. Okay. And then, without talking too much about what I think he's going to bring up, is creating some type of what you call a tombstone function that you call when that code is entered, and it kind of don't remove the code, just guard it with a tombstone and have that tombstone bubble up and notify you, be like, hey, something actually used this. Here's the stack trace, so you can figure out what is calling this. And
so it's just a little bit of observability for that
observability
use case,
once you've identified what you're pretty sure, because there's plenty of times where I've looked at like a controller or method or something and be like, I don't think this is even used anymore. Now, my IDE can probably tell me, to some extent, oh, look, nothing calls this as far as we can tell, because it uses static analysis tools. Other tooling can take a perhaps more resource intensive look at seeing if anything calls it. But then in the end, if I just throw some code there and say, hey, alert me if anything calls this, and let that run for, I don't know, a month, 2 months, whatever that time frame seems reasonable. You're like, I guess
how granular are you talking about? Are you saying just the actual PHP files or the methods within those files or classes? Like wherever
in the code path, like if it's a controller, put it in the constructor, because you're like, I don't think anything is actually creating this ever. If it's, if it's a utility function, put it at the top of the function. And then, if anything calls you, like, oh, it is in use, didn't know that. Oh, nothing has triggered this tombstone for 2 months. Probably safe to kill it, because if somebody next week, if somebody uses it, well, obviously they're not using it a lot, So he's gonna give what's a great talk on that, because with an application that has been around as long as ours, which is a great thing. Sometimes developers are like hold their nose at legacy code, but legacy code that's been around for a very long time tells you one thing: people care about it. Like, customers care about it because they're still using it. But when we have a kind of large code base that has been around for a long time, you run into those areas where, like, I don't think we're using this feature anymore. And being able to identify that and having a good practice towards identifying that is really useful. So Andy's giving those 2 talks on enums and on the zombie code. So at PHP Tech.
Sounds fascinating.
So are you so you're going to buy a ticket, Mark? Is that? No,
if it was close, it's not really the ticket. Well, okay, the ticket costs one thing, but it's the travel cost, it's everything. So it's like,
it's getting out there.
It's a big commitment. I'm like,
hey,
all right. If it was in New York, if you come out there, I would definitely do it. But
I'm sure I could find somebody who wasn't me that would share the room with you.
Oh, that sounds so fun. Yes, just like the college days, just bunking with somebody. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, actually, the rooms at that hotel aren't bad. They're like divided into 2 big sections, so it's not a bad hotel if you have to do something like that. Just saying.
We could hang a sheet in the between the beds.
There you go. No, they're 2 separate rooms. They're nice. It's a nice. The hotel has a nice layout there at Tech. But I feel like we're going to go someplace else, and now I've completely forgotten it. You were asking, foam. Yeah, it was just the open source stuff. So I was kind of excited to get that out.
What's your timeline with that?
Well, the conference is in less than 30 days. So
you want to announce it at the conference? That's open source.
Yeah, we'll talk about it there. So it's already kind of out there. I haven't tagged it in Composer with a version yet, but we've got the basic functionality up in open source. So just haven't really talked about it. So, but yeah, excited about being able to talk a little bit about what we're doing. It's always fun, share some of the things that we've learned. Because along the way, it was great, because it was a very collaborative effort for the team. My perspective was we would create for PHP, you've got what we call request handlers, which are part of it's one of the interfaces that the PSRs provide, which are just kind of like a
PSR is a PHP standard.
Yeah, PHP standard recommendations group. And it's a bunch of different frameworks have representatives there. And when it comes to common things like requests and responses and things like that, they say, hey, can we agree on some common standards? And it's been great, because now you have things like HTTP clients that make requests and frameworks that handle requests. They use the same request response objects, or at least compatible objects. So you can say, oh, I want to grab this middleware or this utility function, and it'll just work with whatever that request and responses, because we all share the same interface. So it's been super helpful there. They have a middleware interface or a middleware set of interfaces, and one of them is a request handler that says, you give me a request, I give you a response. And my initial thought was we would create a API handler, hence kind of the name of the project, where based on the request, this is a GET request, so we're going to use our resolver to get a thing, and then we're going to pass it to the transformer and trust that knows how to transform the response, and then boom, you have, or transform the thing, whatever your entity model, active record, ORM, I don't care, a thing, you have a transformer that says, I'm going to take that and make an API representation of it. And my thought was we'd have one kind of generic handler that would say, well, as long as you construct me with the right set of a resolver to find the thing, a transformer to turn it into an API response, and a hydrator to, if it's a write operation, figure out how to take the request and change state to be, compatible with whatever the request is. And then if it's a get, we know, hey, you're trying to get it. If it's a post, you're trying to make it. If it's and I thought we'd have one handler, but another dev on the team was just, I think they were just making a change to one of our APIs, and they only needed to do one thing. They only needed to like add the ability to update. So instead of changing the existing code, they just said, well, I'm just going to use this pattern for one thing. And they created what was like an update handler. I was like, that's really fascinating, because now my handler does one thing, one operation. So there's a lot of composability.
And it just looks at that request to figure out what to do.
Right. It just says, oh,
Yeah.
I'm the update. So I'm going to assume it's an update. When you give me a request, I'm going to say, well, resolve the thing, pass it to the hydrator to update.
But will that update also do a get? Like, what does it just return? It's just purely for the update.
Well, it'll in the end, if you're doing an update and whatever updates the resource returns a resource, it'll be like, well, I should transform that and send it back, because obviously we want to communicate the change to the user. There's a get handler, or what we would call a read handler, and that just says, hey, given a request, I just resolve it and transform it and give it back. So we have these very composable handlers, and that allows us from a, how do we configure this? And that's a question that this library does not answer. That's up to you. You figure out, well, how will you direct a request to this set of handlers? But as long as you have a factory that says, oh, I know this is a get request to this path, therefore that should be a read handler with this transformer, resolver, and hydrator. And in fact, it's a read handler, so it doesn't need the hydrator, but whatever. Just make it and then execute that operation. Essentially, we have a very, very configurable system that is it doesn't matter. Like, part of me, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it as an example before the talk, is just wants to grab some weird legacy project and be like, we're going to add an API to it, because it doesn't matter. We can, it's pretty much just a bunch of simple classes that, as long as you can write a factory to create the right one. And what does your factory look like? I don't know. It depends on the context that you have to add this API to. And that to me is the power, because it,
are you using any dependencies with it, like any libraries?
The only dependency that we have at this point is another open source library we have called HTTP Tortilla, which is just a set of traits that allow you to wrap an existing request response object and manipulate it yourself, kind of like add some extra abilities to it. And we do that to have lazy responses.
Okay. So you don't need like Composer to to bring in a lot of other dependencies.
Not a lot,
That's
but
good.
just one. And now if you're developing, we'll bring in PHP unit and a bunch of other things for dev dependencies to say, hey, this is what runs our test suites and all that. But yeah, I think the only dependency right now we have is our dependency on interfaces. So we're dependent on some PSR interfaces, but not the implementations of them. And our other open source library, HTTP Tortilla, because we create this kind of lazy.
Now that's an interesting question, because so when you say you're dependent on the PSR interfaces, what does that look like from a code perspective? Like, are you calling out to something?
No, so Composer,
or you're trying to follow that standard.
Yeah,
within
Composer
your code.
just brings in the interfaces, and we can use those as.
So they are defined interfaces that you can physically bring. Okay.
Yeah, because we're saying, hey, you're going to pass me something, and it's going to be a server request object. I don't care whose server request object you're using. You want to use Laminos's? Great. You want to use somebody else's? I don't care. Because all I'm going to do is use the interface's defined methods on it. So it can be whatever request object you want, as long as it complies with the server request server request object interface, or server request interface, I think is what it is. So we'll bring in a couple of those PSR interfaces, the middleware ones, the request and response objects, and the HTTP factories, which for us means, like, at some point we're gonna have to make an HTTP response. So you configure the factory you want to make it.
So going back to that, to the Drupal Joomla Magenta conversation, is there I know those are big frameworks,
they are
systems, but is there anything in the PHP world that you will not touch? You look at that project or look at that platform or framework, or whatever, and you say, like, I do not agree with that. It's not worth. I don't even want to think about it. Is there anything that has scarred you that you'll not go back to?
That's a good question. Not really, other than to say like all the ones you just listed, I have no interest in touching.
Well, that's what I mean. So if you, let's say maybe it's, I know you're not doing any contract anymore, but let's say if there was a friend who had like needs some help on a project and it was built this specific system, and then you were like, no, I'm not touching that.
It would, yeah, all the ones that you just listed. just because they become frameworks that are so big, you have to understand the framework.
Yeah, it takes so much time.
It's not that you have to understand PHP, you have to understand the framework.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's not probably worth the time it would take me to understand that. Now, it's a bug and I can maybe dive in and figure it out, maybe. But no, I don't really have any desire to learn how to code in that way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing for me.
Yeah, that's something with new developers too. You don't learn until you actually go through the pain a couple of times. But the cost, that learning cost that you're talking about, to really have a good understanding of the platform, so you can actually be efficient with it and to use it in a well architected way, in a sense, it does take a long time, and it maybe takes a couple of revisions or versions of that project to really utilize it as best, because you have to learn that framework, and it can take a good amount of time.
And that, to be honest, like that is one of the things that with our API handler library, I'm trying to avoid. It's like, yeah, you'll have to pick something up, but it should be really simple. And it shouldn't be like you have to bend your code to fit this library. It's this library just presents you with a way to attach it to your code. So if you would, and then that was kind of in the back of my mind, it'd be cool to grab like WordPress or Joomla or Drupal or something like that and say, hey, let's bolt an API onto this. I know they probably already have one, right? And I know those projects do. But let's say they didn't and we wanted to add our own. How easy is it to do? Well, this is how easy it is. You just have to create a factory that does this, and then create your individual API transformer, hydrator, resolver that know how to get whatever it is you're saying you should get. And those are going to be coupled tightly to whatever your existing code is. That's why from the perspective of our library, they're just interfaces. So you just write this code. I want to get a WordPress user if we're building an API for WordPress. Cool. I'm guessing you're going to like get the WordPress object or something and figure out where a user is and look at the request and say, oh, you gave me an ID. I can figure out how to find that in the database. Here it is. They'll return it. And then something else turns that into API response. But that's all your code. That's all integration code with whatever you're trying to put an API around. So this framework is not necessarily geared towards those that are like, I want to build a new API. It's geared towards exactly our use case. We've got an existing application and we want to be more responsible about and more modern about how we expose some of this data via APIs. Here's a tool that can let you do that. So I'm excited to talk about it.
So I love today we talked so much about WordPress.
Did we?
I compared to other shows, yeah.
Compared to other shows, yeah.
We talked a lot about it.
It wasn't necessarily
I haven't even mentioned
WordPress
to you the fact that I'm back on WordPress. So my website, markcoberline.com, is hosted on WordPress.
Not a sponsor.
No.
markcoberline.com.
So if you go to the website, you'll see I have a blog post about what's running the website, because I built a CDK construct to run WordPress on AWS using Fargate spot instances. And I have a whole system diagram there, so you can see how I have the infrastructure set up for it.
Super simple. I mean, there's what in the world this diagram? I want to bring this up. I don't know. It's not easy to bring up in Restream, but
so maybe we can get into this next week. We could talk about my WordPress infrastructure that I built, and I open sourced it. I have the code on GitHub.
Because we've got 1:30 left, and there's no way we can dig into this right now.
But it's pretty cool. I have it running on containers, on Fargate, on spot instances with a load balancer.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
So tell me, in the minute 14 we have left, with all this, what's it cost?
$30 a month.
Really?
Yeah. And we could talk about. I had initially had some cost issues with it.
You've got two availability zones here.
Yeah.
I mean,
my plan was try to get it to the same. If I was going to host a WordPress site, I'd probably use a WP engine.
Right.
So, but I wanted to do this on AWS, and how could I do it in a scalable, reliable way? And yeah. So, but also keep the cost as low as possible. So I could talk about how I did that.
This is fascinating. Yeah, next week. Wow. This is, I was unprepared to even.
It's actually been
see
on.
this
It's
one
been
coming.
online for probably about a month now. I just haven't I haven't talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right, this looks fascinating. For those of you who want to do your show prep for next week, go to markcoberline.com and try to understand the diagram of how to host WordPress in 2 different availability zones. You know what? By next week, you think you can get it running in 2 different regions?
Now that would be an extra cost.
Multi regions is like, that's the holy grail.
It probably could, but that would just, like I said, I think from a cost perspective, that would be.
It would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, how do you do multi-region with data storage?
You'd have to do some syncing because there is some.
Syncing, but that's expensive.
We could sync up the databases.
Right,
Yeah.
but that's expensive because your inter-region traffic is cheap, but out region
The cost
to
is
region,
just the replicas. It's just the additional instances that you're running. So,
But don't you also have, so if you took this, and we should probably wait for this for the next week. It'd be fun to talk about. If you took this and instead of 2 availability zones, you just said, no, I'm going to run them in 2 regions. Still just going to have 2, but they're going to be running in different regions. But the big problem, as I understand it, is to replicate your data across regions, you start getting hit with a decent amount.
Oh, because the egress, charges,
out traffic charges.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm not sure. I haven't took a look at the cost, and I know that I was really just looking at the instances cost of if I was going to have 2, just like if I wanted to just have the multi availability failover. I can't think anymore. Then that was a little extra cost. I don't have that turned on right now, so my database is still just in 1 availability zone.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah,
I don't have it just for cost because I was like, I just want to try to see it run it for a couple months and then see what keep the cost and stabilize that, and then I'll adjust the database to see how could I get better replication. But also I could just back it up too. That's what I could do. I just run
if your
a daily backup
down.
Yeah.
If AZ1 goes down hard, then
true.
AZ2 doesn't even know what to do because it doesn't have data.
True. Yeah. So that's why if you had a read replica, or if you had a failover instance, that are just that's the easiest way to do it. But that's just an extra cost. I was just trying to keep the cost as manageable as possible. But yeah, we could talk about that.
Sounds fun. What we haven't talked about? I forgot to tell you. I've got piglets. That's
piglets
keeping me busy this morning. I was messaging people about coming to get them. Yeah.
What do you mean coming to get? You mean to pick them up?
Yeah, they're almost. They were born Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh.
So I was getting ready to head to church, and I go down, and I'm like,
so
there's piglets here.
They just appeared.
Because so the more I read up on some of the things, the first time for a sow is not as easy to understand where they're at. And I was pretty sure the sow was pregnant, but the first time it's a little bit harder to tell. Once they've been through it once, things start changing a little bit faster and more noticeably. So I'm guessing the next time around I'll have a better feel as to when. But yeah, it was a surprise. But they're almost 2 months old, so it's ready. I'm keeping 4. Had a litter of 12. 11 survived, which was pretty impressive. I'm guessing for any breed, especially the one that we have. So yeah, but that's.
So are you just giving them away? Or are you selling them? What's the?
I'm trying to set it up so the cost for the piglets covers the feed for my breed stock for half a year, because you should get about 2 litters a year. So if the piglets that I don't need for us covers the cost for maintaining the breed stock, then hey, everything's even.
Oh.
So, and if I can find some people locally that want to continue to take them and basically give them that at what is it essentially a wholesale, it's my cost.
Yeah.
I think that makes it easy because I don't want to be I'm not interested in necessarily selling them and marketing them that way. It's just I just want nice pork, honestly.
All right.
So, but this is what you get when you watch the bonus stream, folks. This stuff doesn't make the.
Adventures in pig husbandry.
Animal husbandry.
Yeah. Animal husbandry. Is that
adventures. Yep. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll actually build some of the fancy electronic type stuff that I want to do to.
All right.
Do that stuff, but
Oh, also going to be talking to an AWS recruiter today.
Wait, a recruiter for AWS? Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
How does that work?
That's at 11:30.
What, for
Well,
Amazon?
yeah, for AWS.
Oh wait, you could work for AWS?
Well, I got a hold of a recruiter, was able to make a connection with him. So having a conversation today,
All right.
get his feedback. So I don't know. We'll see.
I've got I just have to run the show summary through the filter to make it sound like us. Then I'll get up less. The last
Okay.
week's episode.
Just ping me and let me know, and I'll
Yeah.
push it then. And eventually I'll get the pipeline done for our site too.
I was gonna say I think
Yeah.
I will move over to Assembly AI eventually, and if we could automate all of that, that might be really clever. I don't know though.
Assembly AI, huh?
Yeah.
I did want to do a test. That's why I was asking for I wanted to compare the text we're getting now, and I want to do a test with running it through the transcribe API on AWS. I just want to see what the quality's like.
I should do that with Assembly AI then, because I think like with Assembly AI, the way I mix it, what I'm using now, which is Podium, it thinks there's 3 people sometimes, and I don't. It's not like I send the bumper music mixed. So it is just us, and they're confused.
Is that in way? Are you using that for the actual transcription, or then also the summaries or the chapters?
Transcription summaries. Everything is coming from
it's
Podium
done for that one place. Okay.
But I want to move back to Assembly because I was using Assembly for the transcript originally, and they have a nice feature where I can tell them it's stereo audio, and that they shouldn't try to detect speakers. That the left is one person and the right is another person, and that's super helpful. They can give me a transcript, and then Assembly AI has a large language model they call Lemur. It's basically Claude that they've tuned for transcription, and I can pass it a transcription key and ask it questions like I could probably say, hey, here's some example summaries that fit our style. Look at this transcript and write me a summary that's only this many characters or only this many words or something to constrain it. But I want to play with that, so I'll try to run this show through Assembly.
Yeah, and then what's the cost for that?
I have no idea. It wasn't. I mean, not enough that I care.
Oh, okay. Because what I was going to do,
Podium's expensive. Podium's like $9.
What I want to do without even more about rebuilding the site and
right
is really just that one little pipeline. Say if we drop an auto file into a bucket, have it pick up, run it through transcribe, and then also once you get the file back from that, the text, run that through like a model on Bedrock and see what the results are. So can it be close to what you get, and then also see what the cost of that is? So I'm just curious.
Because even if we go with Bedrock, that'd be fine too. I think with Bedrock you could bring in Claude and tune it yourself.
It's just a matter of like how much the cost of which is gonna be the best model to use and the cost for using it like that. But for our purposes, we're not dealing. It only happens once a week, right? So it's gonna be super cheap.
Right. For me, I'm just wanting to go back to Assembly AI because Podium charges me $9 for basically an hour because I don't want to subscribe to it.
I want to avoid that. Especially like I like the kind of the per the per usage cost compared to like the subscription, because then you're locked into using that.
And Assembly is not bad, and we could from the transcript it should know the timestamps, and so we could even have it come up with summaries or not summaries like chapters. And do some of that stuff. It does so Assembly also does chapter detection with their own NLP libraries, but I think using the LLM is probably a better way to go.
Okay,
we can play with that. Sounds like
all right.
I'm going to stop this post stream now that everybody's learned about all the fun stuff that we're planning on doing.